Okay, so I know this is coming a few days late, perhaps, but there's something I've seen in the news recently that I really want to talk about, and it's related to, of all things, sex education. Recently, Ohio has put forth a budget bill, 2-year budget bill, that will defund Planned Parenthood and impose a fine of $5,000 on teacher who provides certain kinds of sex education instruction to their students. Now, what kind of sex education instruction will they be fining? According to a Huffington Post article, the amendment also prohibits teachers from distributing contraceptive materials and bans public schools from using the services of any individual or organization who, quote, endorses student non-abstinence from sexual activity as an appropriate or acceptable behavior, or if that individual or organization promotes, endorses, advocates, or condones gateway sexual activity. But to me, this is all just pointless and stupid. I mean, here they are endorsing abstinence-only education again, when it has already been shown to not be as effective as comprehensive sex education. I want to give you some statistics now for the Advocates for Youth website. Each year, U.S. teens experience as many as 850,000 pregnancies, and youth under age 25 experience about 9.1 million sexually transmitted infections. By age 18, 70% of U.S. females and 62% of U.S. males have initiated vaginal sex. And it goes on about comprehensive sex education. Research has identified highly effective sex education and HIV prevention programs that affect multiple behaviors and/or achieve positive health impacts. Behavioral outcomes have included delaying the initiation of sex, as well as reducing the frequency of sex, the number of new partners, and the incidence of unprotected sex, and/or increasing the use of condoms and contraception among sexually active participants. No highly effective sex education or HIV prevention program is eligible for federal funding because mandates prohibit educating youth about the benefits of condoms and contraception. Now, why would people want to ban something that could potentially decrease the levels of sexually transmitted infections and the levels of pregnancy? I mean, I thought that's what sex education was trying to achieve. I know that when I was in middle school, I learned very early on, I think it was in the 6th grade, about different forms of contraception. And in the 8th grade, I think I learned about the reproductive anatomy of both men and women. So I would say I had a pretty comprehensive sex education, at least compared to what kids today are learning, I would say. I'm going to throw some more statistics at you. Between 1991 and 2004, the U.S. teen birth rate fell from 62 to 41 per 1,000 female teens. Some experts attribute 75% of the decline to increased contraceptive use and 25% to delayed initiation of sex. Now, 1991 to 2004, this would be during the comprehensive sexual education period, back when that was enforced, rather than the abstinence-only sex education that's taught in a lot of schools now. So, there you go. Comprehensive sex education, very effective at preventing STIs as well as pregnancy. Now, according to Columbia University researchers, virginity pledge programs increase pledge takers' risks for STIs and pregnancy. The study concluded that 88% of pledge takers initiated sex prior to marriage, even though some delayed sex for a while. Rates of STIs among pledge takers and non-pledgers were similar, even though pledge takers initiated sex later. Pledge takers were less likely to seek STI testing and less likely to use contraception when they did have sex. Analysis of federally funded abstinence-only curricula found that over 80% of curricula supported by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services contained false, misleading, or distorted information about reproductive health. Specifically, they conveyed false information about the effectiveness of contraceptives, false information about the risks of abortion, religious beliefs as scientific fact, stereotypes about boys and girls as scientific fact, and medical and scientific errors of fact. Now, in my mind, this points to the religious aspect of all this. The reason why abstinence-only education is supported and comprehensive sex education, i.e. learning about what about the use of contraceptives and everything, it all goes back to religion. It all goes back to people going to the Bible and saying, oh yeah, we use the Bible as our guidelines for how to govern our sexual behavior. Well, here's the thing. The biblical writers lived in a period where contraceptives didn't even exist. Number two, it was the biblical writers who were encouraging people to be fruitful and multiply and have as many babies as possible, saying it was God telling them to do all this. And also, here's something else to consider. Young people, back in the days when the books of the Bible were written, young people were married very young. I mean, 13, 14, 15 years old. Girls were usually married off before right after their first period. What's next? Arranged marriages? As opposed to a girl falling in love and marrying the person that she loves. I mean, we could go back to that. I mean, really, that's basically what people are encouraging in my mind when they try to limit when people try to limit what kids can learn. They're trying to encourage that, a return to that period that the biblical writers lived in. That is what they did. Do we really want to go back to that? I mean, that was over what, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago? I mean, really, have we not evolved since then? Have we not progressed at all since then in our scientific knowledge, in our understanding, in our society? Has our society not evolved since then? I mean, think about it. Back then, slavery was okay. Rape was unacceptable to a degree, but the rapist was not really punished, except that he had to marry the person that he raped. I'd hardly call that a punishment, but you get the idea. I mean, really, why would you accept rules from a period like that, where those things were acceptable? I mean, really, this is ridiculous. No. Young people need to have knowledge and awareness of what's going on with their bodies. They need to have access to information, and if they don't get that information from a teacher, they're going to get disinformation from their peers anyway. They're going to seek out that information on the internet by watching porn. So, right away, disinformation from everywhere. How do you expect, I mean, that's just it, I guess. People don't really expect young people to really be educated and to learn anything, right about contraceptive use or anything like that. They expect their kids to remain ignorant, and that's just sad. That is so very sad to me. So, anyway, yeah, I just wanted to rant a little about the state of sex education in America today. I really feel like we should go back to the sex education we had in the 90s. I feel like it was so much better, and young people benefited more from having from having correct information about contraception. And if they wanted to be abstinent, then that was their choice. I don't see where enforcing abstinence on everyone is necessarily a good thing, because young people, you know, as human beings, I mean, it's only natural for most people to have urges. So why prohibit them from having that except in where it's acceptable in marriage? And the funny thing is, like I mentioned before, young people during the time of the biblical writers, they were already married by the time they felt the inclination to have sex. So really, if you want to go back to that time, get the hell out of America. Otherwise, let's evolve, let's progress, let's put comprehensive sex education back on the menu, and let's teach our children properly, okay? Thank you. Bye bye.